Hi, I'm Kathy with the Denham Springs-Walker Branch of the Livingston Parish Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make these cute tote bags out of an old t-shirt. You can use a small t-shirt, medium, large, depends on how big you want your tote bag to be, and it's real easy. I have two different methods here I'm going to show you, depending on how the look that you want and what you've got available to use. So, this one was done with a really small t-shirt, and it makes a really small tote bag. You can have it be your little child's first book bag. Put a children's book in there. It's just the right size for a little small book. I'm going to show you the difference between this one and that one. This one doesn't have the fringe on the bottom because it was such a little small shirt. I didn't have a lot of excess room, so I sewed it on the inside. If you have a sewing machine, you can just sew it on the machine, and it's really quick. You might want to use a stretchy stitch, a back and forth stitch. I didn't use the machine, I just did it by hand, and I used a back stitch there that you can, it's kind of stretchy because you go one step forward, two steps forward, one step back, over and over to get the stretchy stitch. But I sewed the bottom by hand. You don't have to have a sewing machine to do these things. It didn't take very long. And then when you turn it inside out, you've got your little book bag. Now what I did up here at the top that made it look a little different, on this side I didn't bind it off on this side. I didn't sew anything, and so over here it's decorative stitch, but it also covers the raw edge. And I'm going to show you what I did there before we work on cutting it out. If you've seen one of these in your sewing kit, it's a needle threader, and this is a perfect time to use it. When you're using, this was embroidery thread. See the embroidery thread? It comes in a packet like this, and it's 6 strands, so that's a lot to put through a needle. So you want to use a needle with a fairly big eye on it. I don't know if you can see that. And the way you use a needle threader is you put that little tiny wire through the eye of the needle. Can you see that? I put that right through the eye of the needle. Now that's easy to put a thread through. So you put your thread through the wire. You thread the wire. You don't worry about the needle. You thread the wire. You see that? And then when you pull the wire back through the needle, oh wow. What's supposed to happen is that the wire pulls the thread right through the needle instead of breaking off. There you go. And then you can pull the rest of the thread through. Sorry about that. We had a little technical mishap. But you see, that's how you should use your needle threader, and in a perfect world, that thing wouldn't break. So I'm going to show you how to do this is called a blanket stitch or an overhand stitch, that you can go around the edges and finish that raw edge and make it look good. And it's called an overhand stitch because you put it over, and then you're going to put your needle in at the depth that you want your stitch to be and bring it out, and you're going to put it on top of the thread there so that when it comes through, it catches the thread. It stays out there. You leave the thread up top, and you put your next stitch straight like that. It's very easy, and it holds the thread there. It's got a little give. It'll stretch when you want it to. And you can just keep going around. It goes pretty quickly. This one I'm going about every little more than 1/4 of an inch, a little less than half. We call that 3/8. And you just keep going around and around till you get as far as you want to go. I'm just going to go a little ways. You can see this is called the blanket stitch because people used to use this to bind off blankets. They would make their own blankets or quilts, and they would go around with this stitch to make it look nice and keep the edges done. So, as you can see, you can just keep going around with that until you're ready to tie off the knot, and then you just do a regular tie-off knot. Well, I can show you that. When you're ready to tie it off, you bring your needle back in, and you go into the last stitch that you made. You're going to make a loop. First one, I didn't allow very much thread. And then you go through, you pull that one tight, And then you go through one more time. And that's it. There's your knot. You can tie it off. So you can go all the way around and have a little finished look to your book bag if you want to do it that way. And that's for the small t-shirt. When you have more room on your shirt, I'm going to move over here and show you what I did. Oh, here I kept, now here's a little trick. I kept the neckline and this was the hem at the bottom. I cut that off. And I kept it because one of the techniques that I saw showed you putting it through here and using that as a strap so you can make it a little bit longer. If you think your bag is hanging too short and you want it more like a shoulder bag, you can use the excess to make the strap longer. Same thing with the neckline. So that's just a way you can reuse. We're into recycling everything. So that's the little bag. Let me move this over and show you how I did the big bag over here. Now this one got a couple of my favorite books in it. I'm going to show you in a minute. But it's got the little tassels at the bottom, the fringe at the bottom. Also, did the same thing. I kept the hem that I cut off. And you can use that if you want to make it longer. Put it over your arm. You can have it hang a little bit lower if you keep the excess. Some people don't feel like they need to do that, so it's perfectly okay to do it like that. I'm going to show you how I cut the fringe and the top. All right, I like to fold it in half so I know that it's going to be symmetric. That means the same on both sides. Line up the seams here as much as possible. This is not an exact science. However many t-shirts you have to throw away, that's how many trials you can give it. I like to draw a line for my guideline. And we want to kind of make it look like a tank top. And I'm going to cut along that line. That's going to be the handles. I want some good sharp scissors for this part, if you have them. If not, just be patient with your scissors. Turn it to come in from this side. You want to cut away the ink that you used to draw because you don't want that showing. All right. And when you open it up, you can look and see if it needs to be evened out a little bit. Maybe you want to trim it if you got a little messy with your cutting. Now at the bottom, in order to tie this one, if you don't want to sew it or you don't have access to a sewing machine and you like the fringe look, you're just simply going to cut this hem off altogether. There you have that excess. If you want to use it for a handle, you can. Now, if you want to draw a line here, you can. I find that it works just fine to just use the length of the scissors. I kind of like to eyeball things, if you haven't noticed. So, you cut your strips about a 1/2 to a 3/4 inch long. I mean wide. So you just go along, kind of a finger width. You go along and you cut your strips all about the same length, all about the same width. You want them long enough that it's easy to tie a knot with, and long enough to make a little fringe. You do not want to cut your tablecloth. If you feel more comfortable drawing lines and following the guidelines, you can do that too. But like I said, this is not an exact science. It's going to look cute when you're done. Nobody's going to say, hey, that piece of fringe is a 1/4 inch wider than that other one. Almost done. you want to just cut that single layer. All right, now you're ready to start tying. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to show you a little knot. We're going to have a little knot lesson here because I want to show you the difference between a square knot and a granny knot. You're going to appreciate this. I hope. All right. A lot of people think if you just tie an overhand knot twice, you've got a good hard knot. But I'm going to tell you the difference. I'm going to show you the difference. If you tie a square knot, you see this string is on top of it. Well, when you do the second knot, you want to make sure that that string is still on top of the other string. You see there, it kind of makes a square. It looks kind of square and neat. It looks like two loops interlocking. And when you pull it tight, that is a really strong knot. In fact, if you notice, the stronger you pull it, the tighter it gets because it's locking itself in. It's locked the other strings in as you pull it tighter. So a square knot is going to hold for a long time. It's also called a hard knot, a square knot or a hard knot, because it's hard to untie once you get it nice and tight. Now, a lot of people don't pay attention to what they're doing when they tie the second half of that knot. They tie the first knot, and then they want to do the exact same thing with the second knot, and they end up with a knot that looks like, wait a minute, a knot that looks like this. Okay, now that doesn't look like a square. It looks kind of like snakes fighting. And what happens is it's called a granny knot, basically, because that's how Granny does it when she doesn't know any better. And the more, if you loosen it and tighten it, it just keeps coming more and more undone, and eventually your knot's going to come out, and you're going to wonder, how come that knot didn't hold? So, square knot, it's going in the same direction that it came out. You got two loops that are going together and it looks nice and neat. Granny knot, you don't want to do a granny knot. Granny knot is when you come in from the same direction, the wrong direction. You see you're doing the same thing over and over instead of doing it with the outside going in onto top instead of the bottom. See, that's why I wanted to show you rather than tell you. So that's a hard knot, that's a square knot, and it's going to hold. That's what we're going to use on our t-shirt. So there's your knot lesson for the day. And as we tie these, we're going to go over and then over on the outside. And you just keep going along, over, and then goes over from the outside. You just go along your strips, tying one after the other, preferably with a hard knot. Now, if you mess up and do a granny knot from time to time, it's not the end of the world. Like I said, this is not a science, this is a fun tote bag. And so the granny knot is not going to ruin your project, but it's going to look a lot more uniform if you do the same knot the whole way down the line, and it's going to be stronger if you use a square knot. So there you have it. And you just keep tying knots as you go. I think you get the idea. You got about, maybe 15 more to go here, and you're going to end up with the same bag that I've got over here. I'm not going to do the whole thing because that would take a little bit of time, but you understand if you just go along and keep tying knots until you get to the end, you're going to have a book bag that looks like this. And you'll also have that extra piece if you want to make it longer. Let me show you. I was going to just give you a little treat here at the end. My book bag has a couple of my favorite books in it, a couple of my favorite authors. Barbara Kingsolver, this is a book that I could read over and over, Prodigal Summer. I've read it a couple times already. It's one of her best. She's one of my favorite authors. And this one is by Nevada Barr, Track of the Cat. It's the first book in the Anna Pigeon series about she's a park ranger who solves mysteries, and every book is set in a different national park, so that's a lot of fun to read too. So I hope you're enjoying yourself. I hope you're staying safe. So remember to be safe, be happy, and keep reading.